our WhyTry hosted webinar today. My name's Jason Johnson. I'm representing the WhyTry organization, and I'm really excited for the discussion we're going to have today. This is one of my favorite things to do, where we get to highlight some practices I would consider exceptional, and we've got some really great individuals that are going to be able to talk about a topic that I think really interests all of us. My name is Jason Johnson. I represent the WhyTry organization. We're the group that hosts these webinars, and our organization has been around for about 20 years. Our specialty is resilience. We teach the skills and the sources of resilience, as well as social emotional skills. We work in all 50 states. We work in Australia, the United Kingdom, and we've developed just a really fun network of educators and mental health professionals by doing this over the past couple of decades. And so these webinars have been a really fun extension of what we do to be able to bring kind of voice and face to our community and to really highlight some exceptional practices. I love seeing them. And so I'm really thrilled. Today, we're going to be focusing on highlighting some best practices in student engagement. And we have some experts, some incredible professionals, all representing the state of Washington today. And so let me introduce them, and then we'll jump into the discussion. So in no specific order, let me make sure I've got my notes here. Here's who we've got. We've got Anna Marie Dufault, serves as Assistant Superintendent of Student Engagement and Support at OSPI in Olympia, Washington. The division promotes a system of support for 295 school districts in Washington, ensuring that every student is safe, healthy, supported, challenged, and engaged. Anna Marie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dixie Grunenfelder. Did I get the last name pronunciation right?
Perfect.
Thank you. Dixie is the OSPI Director of K-12 Education System and School Improvement, expert in utilizing strategies and evidence-based tools to engage students and to create systemic change. Dixie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Dave Martinez. Dave is currently serving as the Director of Student Life and Athletics, previously been an assistant principal over various areas in Sunnyside High School in Sunnyside, Washington. Dave, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And then last but certainly not least, rounding out our panel, we've got Antonio McLemore. Antonio, did I get your last name pronunciation right?
Yes, just like the rapper.
I didn't want to say it, but that was my first thought. He's Pacific Northwest too, I believe.
Yeah, he's a Seattle guy.
That's right. Okay, Antonio is the president and founder of Priceless Inspiration Foundation. Works directly with schools right now in Pierce County, but I assume potentially broader as well. Kind of an expert in engagement and working specifically with schools, and brings some really important insight. Welcome, Antonio.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, I appreciate you all being here. And what I would like to do is maybe just start off. We're obviously going to be talking about student engagement, and there's a couple of specific things that I want to make sure that we highlight during our discussion today. We're going to go for about an hour. Oh, by the way, one other thing I forgot to mention, the chat space in these webinars becomes kind of a fun area where people can share ideas and ask questions, etc. I hope today that the chat fills the same role. So one request to all of you that I'm going to make as attendees is, if you're willing, take a look at the chat tool, and where you would type in a message, right above where you type the message, it says to, and then there's a little drop down arrow. If that says anything besides to everyone, when you type your message, the other attendees aren't going to be able to see it. If it only says hosts and panelists, it's only going to come to us as the panelists. So if you're willing to adjust that and make it so that the comments you share can be seen by the other attendees, I would appreciate it. Just as a quick test, make your chat adjustment and then type an emoji into the chat that describes how your day is going so far today. Go ahead and hit us with an emoji that explains your day so far. Perfect. I can empathize. I can empathize. Oh, that's good. Well, we're seeing everything. Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, I love it. It looks like people have their chat adjusted over. Thank you for doing that. It brings I think it brings a good life and liveliness to the chat space. All right, let's start off by having the panelists just tell us a little bit more about your current role, what you've been working on or focusing on the last little while. Let's go just kind of around the horn in this order. Let's go Anna Marie,
Yeah.
and then go Dixie, and then go Dave, and then go Antonio.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, and it's great to be here. Here at OSPI, our goal is to make sure that every student is prepared for a post-secondary pathway, be that a career, a technical school, going directly into the job setting. We want to deliver students out into the world who are civically engaged, and we do that by allocating resources, tools, and technical assistance so that our districts are better situated to serve the students that are coming to us.
Thank you. Dixie.
Well, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I work on Anna Marie's team at the State Education Office, and around student engagement, especially during COVID, and now as we kind of come out of that, we've had a focus on school and community engagement and how we partner together and work together to support young people to connect to the learning, have a meaningful experience, kind of think, as Anna Marie said, kind of beyond graduation, what their plan is. In Washington State, we have a graduation requirement of a high school and beyond plan, which is really based on who am I, what do I want to become, and how do I get there? And we've been centering our work on our team around school community partnerships in service to that high school beyond plan.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave Martinez. I had a chance to meet Anna Marie and Dixie in my previous position as I oversaw our counseling department and directly worked with graduation. I was in that position from 2008 to 2020. And our school went from a 49% graduation rate to a 90% graduation rate in that time. So it was a lot of fun to work with the two ladies, and I'll hopefully get a chance to share with you some of the experiences and some of the wounds we have from that still, but it's been and we've been able to maintain it. So.
Antonio.
Yeah, our work really focuses around district administrators, school administrators, educators, professionals, students, and their surrounding communities. A lot of our work is really derived out of co-creating participatory programs, co-design, and encapsulating restorative services to really transform leaders within the building, within our community, and their cultures that provide a cultural responsive learning tool. We really believe responsive services have to reflect the unique complexities of the environment, and so our implementation models are customizable to encourage sustainable long-term growth. We really believe in our role is in addressing inequalities, is what I call focusing on the well-being, and this is what I call the human work. And so we engage with humans, and we help. What we say is we use mentorship as a vehicle to help prepare young people for the world that's in front of them.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you. By the way, I have a good sense of how this discussion is going to go, and I know there's going to be a lot of ideas and potentially even some resources discussed and shared. We are going to put email addresses up at the end if anybody wants to reach out to any of our panelists with follow-up questions, but also to our panelists. I didn't mention it before, but feel free as you talk about anything, if you want to throw a link in the chat for our attendees to see anything. If that's helpful as you present, please don't hesitate. People on here always appreciate and love being directed towards good resources. let's continue the discussion. Let's just set maybe the foundation before we get into some specifics. Let's set the foundation around student engagement. It's a really big term. Wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about the importance of student engagement, perhaps some of the issues that it helps address, and kind of how you've made it a point of focus, or why you've made it the point of focus that you have, because I think you're all experts in that area. Let's adjust the order just a little bit and go with Dixie, Dave, and then Antonio, followed by Anna Marie.
Boy, I was going to defer to Anna Marie, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot. Obviously, it's in the title of our division, Student Engagement and Support Division. So it's really foundational to all the work that we do. And when I first got involved in the work, I was the director of dropout prevention, intervention, and re-engagement, and that quickly the term was thrown out, and we're really talking about continuous engagement. And that doesn't just mean attendance, which is an accountability measure that we use to kind of measure engagement a little bit, but we really looked at continuous engagement and then the re-engagement system. So in our state, we have state legislation and statute around that continuous engagement that passed back in 2007 that guides us. There's key components to that. To Antonio's point, a key part of that is community school partnerships, mentorship, rigorous learning, those types of components that make up this comprehensive approach to how do we keep young people and adults engaged in a culture for learning.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I think that's where I first met Dixie, was with the original re-engagement plan with the state of Washington. And we had, we were working with a program, Graduation Alliance, and we were including, it was at a time when I'm not sure all school districts were doing it, but it was owning all kids. We'd closed our alternative school. We were working super hard to provide that continuous engagement for all kids. And I'm glad you said staff there too, because that's a super important piece. Sometimes when you begin the work, you feel like, it's just a few people are trying to do that re-engagement. When you re-engage and you engage the entire staff, now you've got hundreds of teachers, you've got your counseling staff, you have your paras, you have your cooks, you have your custodians. So we call those our principles. We call them the principles of connect, build, and envision. It's really around the work of sense of self-worth, sense of belonging, sense of hopefulness. The work that probably back, I think it was in the early 80s when that work began. We call it connect, build, and envision. And you'll hear our seniors in their senior capstone classes, they'll use those words. They sometimes, I feel like they know what it means more so, and they can describe what it feels like to be connected, what it means to build powerful relationships, and what it means to envision their future better sometimes than our staff can. So, but it's those principles have been super important for us. I'll stop with that, but that's been a big piece for us. You'll hear me, if you were to come to Sunnyside, you would see the words connect, build, and envision all over our school.
Awesome. Thank you. Antonio.
Yeah, Jason, phenomenal question. I'm standing or sitting in front of you all today as a culmination of like leaders, educators, mentors, community leaders, just like people. My mom used to always say that it takes a tribe to raise a child. And I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for the collective efforts from classroom educators, community educators, street educators, people in my neighborhood. And so I believe a huge part of my work and my assignment in the re-engagement piece is to go back to the intentionality of engaging community, engaging parents, and creating a collaborative efforts in helping to develop that child. If you think about the word education derived from the word edu, the word edu means to draw out or to extract. So I have a fundamental belief system that young people have a genius already within them. And so like this is kind of counterintuitive if I'm an educator and I feel like it's my job to give a young person their greatness. No, I think fundamentally the students are already great. So then what's my job in education? Is it not just to create the type of environment so that young people can grow, right? And so that's where I believe in the engagement conversation, relationships have to be paramount, because I think oftentimes we're trying to convince apples to be oranges. But the moment that I realize and identify what the greatness is within the young people, then I can authentically place them in the environment so that they can grow. I don't ask bananas to be pineapples, and pineapples don't grow natural in Washington State. But bananas don't grow natural in Washington State, right? And so I have to identify who are the students that are in front of them, what's the greatness within them, and how can I help create pathways and give an exposure to the world that not only is in front of them, but the world that they'll create.
Awesome. Thank you, Antonio. Great response. Anna Marie, round us out.
Great, thank you. Well, I'll just say that engagement, Antonio spoke so eloquently of it with the relationship piece. And we know that right now in Washington State, we have about an 80% graduation rate. And where Antonio is working, that rate is up to 90%. And I have, and you heard Sunnyside talk about, they have a 95 graduation rate. It's because of the fact that those schools and their leadership have pivoted to student engagement and relationships, that they're able to be 10 points higher than any of our regular schools.
That's it. That's incredible. That's
Isn't it?
huge.
It is.
I love it. Okay, well, what I want to do now, I want to get into kind of more of the specifics. And one of the things that caught our attention organizationally is we started to learn a little bit about a couple of specific programs that you've implemented up there, specifically the Powerless to Powerful program and the Building Bridges program. And what I want to do is set you all up to kind of talk about what that is, what that looks like, what implementation has looked like, perhaps some of the benefit of it. And I'll step in and ask questions a little bit as I if I want to find out a little bit more. But I've listened to you talk a little bit about it already, and you have some incredible stories and some information. I'm uncertain on what the best order is to have you present on this. Do you have a preferred order? Or do you want me to get out of the way and just let you all cook a little bit on it?
Jason, I thought I could do a little bit of framing on both
Perfect.
of those things, and Anna Marie helped me frame it up because we've each had our different perspectives from a state and regional level on what the work looked like. And then our two experts out there doing the work, Dave and Antonio, you can breathe life into the story if you wouldn't mind.
I think that sounds great.
Good. And I won't spend too much time giving you the foundation, but I would like to give a little bit around. I'll start with Powerless to Powerful. And right out of the gate, I'm going to say it's not a program, it's a way of life. And I learned that early on in my career when I started working in this area. I called the master behind Powerless to Powerful, Dr. Chuck Salina from Gonzaga, go Zags tonight. And I said, Chuck, give me the secret sauce. He was the turnaround principal in Sunnyside back in the day when they were identified for support. I said, what is it? What do you do? And he said, if you're looking for a checklist, if you're looking for a program, this isn't what you're looking for. This is a way that you live. This is how we do school. And it's really based on beliefs and attitudes and how you engage staff in doing work differently. And so it's kind of a philosophy on how you approach the work, and the work is never done. And it's a way, again, to set timeless goals. What is it that you stand for? What do you believe in? And how are you all going to work together systematically to move those goals forward? And there's a lot about people taking ownership. What are they willing to be held accountable for? Staff, students, families, what are you willing to step in and be accountable for? And then hold yourself to that. And everyone raises the water in that effort. And it's not just work happening in Sunnyside, as Anna Marie mentioned, when we started doing action research based on the story in Sunnyside, we looked at all high schools across the state who had high graduation rates over time with low disproportionality in their student outcomes. And all of them had the same story or basis of the same story. It might be contextualized a little differently, but the basis of their work was the same. And it was centered around those relationships and that willingness to hold themselves accountable, and that laser-like focus on those goals that they had set those together. So I'm going to stop there. Maybe Dave, you tell your story.
Sure.
Is that how you want to go, Jason? We'll talk a little about powerless to powerful.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Okay, that'd be
Perfect.
great.
All right, perfect. Yeah, thanks, Dixie, for leading that in there. I'll give you a little background on Sunnyside if you're not sure about Sunnyside High School. 90% free and reduced, 90% Hispanic. We had all the barriers in place to continue as adults. There were a lot of excuses why we weren't being successful, and Dr. Selena was able to come in and help us realize, kind of the direction that we could move as a whole staff. And it was around, we have a framework. It's called our conceptual framework. It's a big part of P2P. It's based on 3 important pieces. And the first part is academic press. And how we describe academic press is having a high standard. And the second part of that is a belief that people can meet that standard. Sometimes people say, I have academic press, I just have a standard. They forget about the important pieces that believing that people can meet it. And that's staff and students both. We're actually getting ready for a PD in April. We're going to go back. We bring up our conceptual framework every single time we're in front of our adults. We introduce it to our community members and our students in our conceptual framework. So that's the first piece, is academic press. The second part is, we call it support, social support. And those are all the different things you would put in place to help people meet that high standard, and then held all together with what we call relational trust. And that is the person giving it is putting in time and energy, has something to offer, and has an expertise. And they also make them feel safe. Those 3 things may not always feel comfortable, but feel safe, because when you're being held accountable, sometimes you may not feel comfortable, but you know that you can make that mistake and keep moving forward. And that's a big piece of our school. I think as an adult, if you think of somebody in your past that had relational trust, they were definitely able to push you, the press, and they were able to give you the supports, and you trust that they wouldn't put you in a position that you wouldn't be successful, and you trusted the supports they put in place. And that's our conceptual framework. We have another piece that in P2P that talks about the action framework. And probably, I can't imagine there's very many high schools or schools that are out there in the nation, for sure in Washington, that don't collect data, don't work around systems in their schools, and don't have collaboration taking place. But not all schools get the result. They may have those 3 things in place. They may have data they're collecting. Sometimes there's so much data out there that you can, just go blind from all of it. There's collaboration that's out there, and they have people have systems. But why don't they get the results? My belief is, and I think if you had Dr. Selena on here, he definitely, he would be a big part of this too. He would say that if the conceptual framework isn't in place, then the action framework won't be as successul. And when we began this work, it was all the conceptual framework. We had to build trust with our staff as our administrators. When we first started the work in 2010, 11, the staff were like, and our admin team's been here, most of our team, I've been here the entire time. The other assistant principals now became our principal, is now our soup. At that time, staff were saying there will not be an existing admin that will become our next principal. By the time Dr. Selena had left, they said there's no way anybody's coming in from the outside, because we've all worked so hard together. That trust had been built. Antonio, you talk about the culture of the school that we call the culture of learning at Sunnyside, and that piece is built on relationships. And we're not always perfect. Sometimes we stub our toe, but we have our true north, our principles of CBE, our conceptual framework that really have driven this work. When I'll get off here in a second, we got a lot of people that share stories, but when Chuck first came He was on loan from Gonzaga University. We were in the Commons, and a young lady came up to him. I stand up. She goes, "Why would Gonzaga want to come to Sunnyside?" And it was just she wasn't trying to be mean or anything. It was just her efficacy at that time. Now we've got a family night tonight. We'll have colleges here. If that girl was here today, she would look at Chuck and she, of course, Gonzaga is here. This is Sunnyside. Stanford's probably over around the corner. I mean, so the efficacy of our staff and our student has just grown because of our conceptual framework.
That is powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, maybe we can get, well, you tell me. I definitely want to hear about the building bridges piece. And I'm thinking maybe Anna Marie and Antonio can speak to that a little bit. Maybe let's take a similar approach. Anna Marie, set us up a little bit on the building bridges piece. And then Antonio, let's have you talk about your experience with that. And then I know I'll have some follow-up questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so another statewide initiative is called Building Bridges, and this was actually born out of state legislation in the year 2007, and it asked OSPI to develop recommendations to the state legislature relative to student engagement and re-engagement. And after 2 years, we submitted lots of recommendations, both systemic and programmatic, and the essential components of those created the state-funded Open Doors re-engagement. Open Doors is a program for youth who are 16 to 21, and the Building Bridges. Building Bridges is targeted at youth-serving organizations and is intended to strengthen supports for students to keep them on track to graduate from high school. And I think that I'd like to pivot to Antonio to share about it because he can speak really eloquently. And we do have a video if you would like us to tee that up.
Yeah, I'll leave that up to you. You can
Okay.
You can queue up and play the video whenever you want. But
Okay,
it would be awesome. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, it's really great. It features Antonio, but Antonio, why don't you speak about it while we get it teed up, okay?
Yeah, well, I'm incredibly humbled and thankful for the opportunity to partner with OSPI and the Building Bridges. I think what Building Bridges has allowed organizations like mine is to really partner with educators in the classroom, partner with schools, and really helping to fill the gap and bringing back to the communal, tribal, bringing community together to help care for our babies. Oftentimes we have educators that are in the classroom and they are overwhelmed with details and expectations around testing scores, GPA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of their focus is around their lesson plan, and they're really good at communicating the importance of young people learning math, but oftentimes are overwhelmed in the intentionality of relationships. So I am a storyteller. So you can't get me on a line and not hear a story from me. So I'll give you a quick example of what we do. We are all about relationships. And I think relationships become consequential to ensure that the work that teachers are doing in the classroom actually sticks. So I'm in the classroom, and a lot of what we've done has really been in an embedded model. We have things that function outside of the school day. But a lot of our models, we come in and we partner with schools, and we're working with a counselor or working with an advisor or working with a teacher that's, whether you're tier 3, your engagement. And so one particular day we had a young man that was, just having a bad day, struggling in the classroom. And this school in Tacoma Public School District, they had developed some processes to really help redirect behavior and create opportunities. But, they had kind of gone through the 3 steps. And I could tell that the educator in the classroom was getting overwhelmed, and I was teaching the lesson plan, but I could tell the teacher was overwhelmed and irritated, and I just tried to continue to teach in the classroom, and I kind of moved position the staff to kind of support that particular student. But I just had an inclination, and I asked this young man to stand up in the middle of the classroom. I said, "Young man, stand up." I said, "I just have a question to ask you." I said, "When is the last time that you've had a man in your life to give you a hug and tell you that you matter?" This young man, he looked down to the ground. He started shaking his head. He said, "Mr. Antonio, I don't remember." You know what? Like, to be honest with you, like, my lesson plan didn't matter anymore to me. And I got all our team up and I went and gave this young man the biggest hug. And I said, "I love you, young man." I said, "You matter. You're great. You have purpose. We love you." And literally all the kids start shooting their hands up. They're like, "Mr. Antonio, we don't remember the last time that there's been a man in our life that's given us a hug." Now, the reason why I'm crying isn't just because of this particular, but like, my father wasn't around growing up. Great man, phenomenal man, but he just wasn't around. And oftentimes the insecurity of my father not being around, math didn't matter to me. Science didn't matter to me. And so what I think about what building bridges gives me an opportunity to do is to do the work that oftentimes is forgotten in the classroom. And it's the young people and the burdens that they're carrying as they walk into the classroom. They are already over-regulated. And so I'm grateful that I get to do the belonging work, because I tell young people all the time, because a part of my work is financial literacy. And I remember I had a student say, "Well, aren't we supposed to be learning about money?" And I said, "Well, young lady, a young queen," I said, "if I gave you $1 million right now, if I gave you $1 million, I said, but your values and the valuables, but your values not here or here, then the valuables of no value." I said, "So if your value isn't here or in here, then even if I gave you $1 billion, the valuables will be of no value." And so this is the work that I get to do in schools. The work I get to do with educators is to help empower young people to believe beyond their circumstances and their realities.
Thank you. That's powerful. I did not have on my to-do list for this webinar Antonio making me cry. So thank you. Thank you for that. Really powerful story. I love the authenticity. I can see now why the work you're doing has caught some of my colleagues' attention. One of the foundational concepts of the WhyTry approach is a thing we call surrendering the one-up, which is all relationship based. It's all about really intentionally making sure that every student that's with us feels value and feels worth, because there are so many kiddos that just aren't getting that. And sometimes our schools themselves, our buildings themselves are structured in a way where the second students walk in, they may feel a lowered sense of value in relation to perhaps even the grown-ups in the building. And so I really admire your vulnerable and your authentic approach to this. I'm excited to see where this goes. So I want to find out a little bit more. I want to keep the discussion going, and you all can feel free. If there's something you feel like I'm missing that you want to highlight more, feel free to interject and add that. But I am interested if you could share with us a little bit, perhaps some of the impact that these programs have had on both students and on faculty and staff, what that is, how that's impacted them, and maybe even some specifics on what the implementation of some of these has looked like within buildings, just kind of like structurally and practically. I'll let you kind of choose the order again if you want to pivot back and talk a little bit on powerless to powerful, share some of your perspective on that, Dave, and then we can pivot back to building bridges and hear a little bit more. And if there's any bleed over, feel free. Don't let my question force you to overstructure your answer.
Yeah, sure. So P2P, and it actually it would grab the work that was been done in the Bridges program, because it was, again, we were a 49% graduation rate. And so when we began to believe in ourselves, when our admin, our staff, and our student efficacy improved, then that's when we started making these huge strides in our graduation rates. And it's not just graduation. When we talk about Infusing Your Future, we've got kids that are now having clear plans on their post-secondary, whether they're going military or they're going trade schools or they're going universities. We even tell kids, like, if you're going to go into the workforce, we want you to be the best prepared person leaving high school this year. It's going to go in the workforce. So that work it bleeds over to not just right now it's their life after SHS. We talk about we had a system for tracking our seniors, and it has grown so much since when we first started. When we knew we were at a 49% graduation when Chuck came in, and he's sitting in there. If you haven't had a chance to meet Dr. Selena, you really need to. Just amazing person. Wasn't always the most patient with me, but he knew we were at a 49% graduation rate with our seniors because we'd been that number for a while. But when he asked me what our how many of our juniors are on track, and so I call up our junior counselor and I asked her, I said, hey, what's our numbers for our juniors? And it's quiet. And Dr. Selena's, snapping his fingers and wanting the number right now. And we were like, our juniors were at a 35 or 40% on track. So, because I kept telling him, we've got this, it's all I knew was what we'd done before, right? And we'd actually played with some ways to monitor our kids. And I turned around, looked at him, and he goes, okay. So that's what we built. It's called the all hands on deck process. And basically what we do is we're set up, we're grade level counselors. We have 2,200 students now. We've gone from 1,400 to 22. And our senior counselor, she splits up all the seniors, and we do a color code system. It's pretty simple. Red, you're off track. Yellow, you're sort of off track. And green, you're on track. And our red kids, when they start to progress, you'll hear them like, I'm green today. And it's pretty cool to hear a kid say, I've turned green, and knowing what that means. But so we've taken our seniors, and then each of our grade level counselors takes a caseload of seniors, and there's a mixture of red, yellow, and green. We use our school psych, helps us with our students in services. We have migrant graduation advocates and specialists, and they take caseloads, and then they track them and they invite parents in. Before school starts, we've got our red student center, and we actually have orange with state testing too. And we'll meet with parents and kiddos, and we create a graduation plan, and then we do periodic checks. And then if kids are off track, we bring them in, and we'll just and people always ask, how do you get parents in? And it's really as simple as our secretaries call them up and say, hey, we have a graduation meeting today. And there's very few parents that don't want to come in and meet about a graduation meeting. I mean, they want to hear about what the plan is and how they can be assisted. So the time we were doing tracking, it was almost painful thinking back to those days when we were doing it the way we are. Now we've got Google forms and sheets, and we have formulas that track it for us. And we've actually incorporated it now into our athletic department. So our coaches now are another set of eyeballs on our kiddos, making sure they're being successful. So always using our framework as our groundwork. But so that's how I would say we bleed into the bridges work, because we're making sure our kids are not just being successful and getting to graduation. If we would have stayed at 49%, I'd stop doing the numbers on this. You think we were at 49% and now we're at 90, well, my math is bad, but that gap right there, if we would have continued, you think about how many non-graduates would not have graduated from Sunnyside High School over the last 12 years. And you talk about an impact on the community. And when COVID hit, we're very relational here, and that was rough because it's hard to be relational through a Zoom, right? I mean, if we were in person today, you'd see I'm a little more animated when I'm speaking, and but it's tough. And so we had to think outside the box, and what are we going to do to keep? We did a virtual PEP assembly in April of that year, and there was 1,000 people that got on Instagram Live, and our custodians probably thought I'd lost my mind because I'm in the gym doing an assembly by myself. We just kept doing these things, and we tried to keep everyone engaged and staying a part of our Grizzly family. And I think that's helped us when we've come out. We knew that first year coming out of COVID was going to be tough because you've got kids that hadn't been finished off their middle school year. And there's a lot of finishing that happens in that last part of 8th grade. If there's any middle school teachers out there that are on here right now, they know that last part of 8th grade is super important. so they can prep them to be at the high school. And then we had a 9th grade group that didn't really get to be onboarded as what it means to be a Grizzly in Sunnyside, and all the things that we did in that year. We do a link crew as our freshman orientation. We did it on Zoom, and it was rough, but we did it. We figured out how to do chat rooms with our link crew leaders and things like that. And then when we came back, we told our staff, listen, we really have got 2 9th grade classes this year. The group that are sophomores, because they didn't get onboarded, and our group that are coming up. And it helped everybody understand, like, okay, it's going to be different than normal. And it took us probably to like April to get to October behavior. But we knew that as a whole staff, and we worked hard to get there. And this year's, again, we meet with the seniors coming in, and the next year, like, your job's super important because you've got to make sure that we're maintaining our Grizzly culture. And so hopefully that hit sort of your question that you were asking there, but.
That's great. Thank you. And I can relate to the assembly. You said that's how these webinars started, was me sitting in a room by myself when the pandemic hit, going, how are we going to stay connected to our network of friends? So
yeah, Dixie had me do one. That was the first one, and it's so hard because I'm be reading faces. Does this make sense to that person or not? Dixie had me do a presentation on systems of support and how we engage. We used our all hands on deck system to make sure we had connectivity with all grade levels, and we were grabbing, so we were using everybody, and I had a spreadsheet and checking off, making sure, and our goal was to get 100% connectivity. And anyway, so yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Anna Marie, are you thinking we want to cue up that video now?
I would love to. And before I do, well, let me get it going. And then maybe afterwards, because the teacher, Antonio's teacher, is here today too. So let me get this going.
I am somebody. I am somebody.
Okay, I think we're having a little trouble. Let me.
I am somebody. I am
working for me, Anna Marie.
Oh, it is? So everyone's in here?
I am somebody. Okay, so real quick.
When I was 15 years old, my mom asked me a question that I truly believe really set the stage for what I'm doing today. She said, Antonio, she said, baby, like, what is it that you desire to be or to do when you get older? And I said, Mom, you know what? I don't really know what I want to do, but whatever it is, I know I want to help people.
How are you using your time? How are you investing your time? You know, you have this.
One of the things that I was abundantly clear to me at the age of 15 was I was aware of my pain, but I was also abundantly aware of other people's pain. The Building Bridges funding has first brought community leaders together. We get to come in and serve students. We get to hear their stories. We get to empower them. We get to hear about their worlds. And ultimately, we become a part of the tribe of helping to elevate that young person's life and serving their families.
Antonio has been just such a great partner because he really connects with students. So he can relate to them culturally in ways that I can't, that other people can't.
I was able to then partner with Antonio and Mr. Baki to really find students that would really benefit from his mentorship.
Hold on to where you're going. Hold on to why you're here. As long as you keep that in mind, you'll have the energy, the capacity that you need to continue to go on that journey.
At the core of what we do is about building relationships and preparing our young people for the world that's in front of them, but teaching educators to realize that the work that they do in their classroom is designed to be transcendent.
Things that I think is important, right?
Antonio has been a pillar of growth. Like, he always focuses on improving yourself and always believing in yourself.
Having somebody running their race right next to you, being their most authentic self, I just want to embody everything that he is.
He's brought in so many different people who have just talked about their failures and how that made them grow. And it makes me feel inspired knowing that my failures aren't meaningless. They're stepping stones for me to build my success.
Part of discovering young people's greatness It's synonymous with planting an apple seed. We know that the apple seed is destined to be great, but it has to be placed in the proper environment in order for it to grow. I believe a part of my role in preparing young people for the world in front of them is using their experience, the culture that they encounter every single day to inform the decisions that are being made. Because when we use the student voices to inform our work, our communities get better.
I
am somebody. Don't let anyone convince you of anything otherwise. I think that's the most valuable thing that I could teach them. And I am a firm believer that every young person has a greatness or a genius inside of them. It's just yet to be discovered.
Awesome. I'm going to bring Mr. Foreman on as a panelist. We've got several firsts on here. This is fantastic. Bringing on an additional, there we go, guest panelist. See if that worked. There we go. Welcome to our panel, Mr. Foreman. How you doing?
I am doing great. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you guys.
Well, I'm going to just, again, I'm going to get out of the way and let Antonio and Mr. Foreman cook. Let us tell us a little bit more about the impact this has had on students or faculty or staff, or however you want to present that.
You know, one thing before Mr. Foreman, I'll give the baton to you. But one of the things that I think has been consequential in the Building Bridges work is it's really allowed me to partner with educators and even the school in moving some of this work forward. Because oftentimes what happens in schools when they think about, improving on, the well-being or the SEL, whatever that, right, it oftentimes is a system level work, right? System to educator. And then we end up hiring one staff member and the burden becomes theirs. So they're responsible for the well-being of all 1,000 students on their campus. And so one of the conversations that happened prior to Mr. Foreman being hired is the importance of representation, because I was the only African-American educator that our students had exposure to. And so the principal in the school started talking about, hey, how can we be intentional about diversifying our campus and bringing in the right candidates? So they hired Mr. Foreman. And I'll never forget, sorry, I'm gonna share this story, but I told him I was gonna share. I'll never forget, like a month in, asking him how things are going. He's like, man, I love the school. The work is amazing. Man, I just love the administrators, phenomenal school. I said, but how you doing though? He said, man, I'm overwhelmed. He said, man, I am now being pulled into the office. I'm a counselor now. I'm doing disciplinary things. And I think what our collaboration and collaborative work has done is it's not all on his shoulder. And Fife is continuing to improve, and they're continuing to build other community partners so that the weight doesn't have to be on one or two educators' backs. And I think sometimes we can overwhelm and overburden our classroom teachers because we make them wear 1,000 hats on top of having expectations of of students learning science and math, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Foreman. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about the program, the impact that you've seen on students and maybe staff, or just your own experiences, however you want to.
No, of course. No, I came in from a very diverse district, and 4 or 5 years ago when I came on and I had the opportunity to sit down with my principal and he hired me, I was the only person of color as a certificated employee at Fife. We have a very diverse group of students here within Fife. And so getting the opportunity to work with Antonio and kind of what was tasked at first was creating a safe place for our some of our minority students, and in particular our Black student union, our Black students. Antonio came in and established a program called YBE, which is Young Black Entrepreneurs. And within that environment, we were able to identify students that weren't necessarily our tier 2, tier 3 type students. They're more of our more success students. However, it was able to work with them to start talking about colleges and careers in that sense. Fast forward 4 years, COVID happens, all that great stuff. We have our BSU that we currently have. In the time frame of working with Antonio and his program, the individuals, I think what it is what he brings in to the classroom. Me personally, I'm a special education teacher. I'm a life skills teacher. And so for me to step out of that classroom and then step into another environment to be able to work with our Black and brown students in a capacity that is just as impactful as it is working with the students that I currently work with on a regular basis. But it's the stories that Antonio is able to bring to those students that allows our other students to then create and relate themselves with not only Antonio, but the other speakers that he brings in. What it does for us is it created a safe place for our students to speak freely, but also to speak their truth. Within the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a lot of stuff happen within our society. And for our students, Antonio kind of hit on this already. It's not always about the book. It's not about the science, the math, and the reading and the writing. Sometimes it's just about getting them to be able to be comfortable within the space that they're in. And sometimes coming to school can be either a great space or a scary space for them, but having a avenue for them to be able to express themselves freely. That's what Antonio does well. That's what the people that he brought in, there's other people. I mean, Christian Page that he's connected me with. There's another financial literacy individual that he's connected me with. And so what he's done for me personally is open my eyes to other opportunities within the Pierce County, within Tacoma, Fife, Spanaway, Puyallup area. And then also giving me the opportunity to then pick his brain. A lot of the stuff that I use still, the Appleseed analogy that Antonio is absolutely famous for in our area, I use that on the regular basis. I also coach different sports. And so using that analogy and using those life lessons that we learn from sports and tying them back into our community here at Fife, but also with our Black and brown students, and giving them an opportunity to not only see their future within me, like them seeing a Black and brown successful educator, but also a community activist, entrepreneur. It gives them hope for them not necessarily having to be status quo and live up to a stigma of, just being an athlete or just being a rapper, or being, in our situation here at school, a custodial staff. We have, out of the percentages of people of color on our campus, a high percentage of them are our custodial staff, unfortunately. And so sometimes seeing a person in a position that is not necessarily seem, the wording wise, they see us being successful, which then puts them in a light and it puts them on a track to feel that same way that they can also be in that same trajectory.
Mr. Foreman, thank you, because one of the things that I oftentimes tell building administrators is it's really hard to ask young people to become something that they've never seen. So we put these expectations on them, but we don't give them any formal way of actually exposing them to actually what they could become. And so a part of the diversity of leaders that they get an opportunity to touch, not just from Mr. Foreman and other community partners, but like literally when we get to say to the young Appleseed, you can become an apple, well, we show them apples. Like we show them a thriving apple tree, because apple trees grow best in community, right? Like that's why they grow best in orchards. They're better than just the apple seed that you see on the side of the road, is because there's an ecosystem working under the soil, right, where it's all interconnected. And I think this is really the work of, like, how can we build these interconnected systems that empower organizations, right, to come in and work with educators, that empower parents to come in to be a part of the educational journeys. And so they realize that they are all working together.
I love it. Thank you so much. So just a heads up, everybody, and I have a quick question for the panelists. We're scheduled to go for about an hour. I want to at least ask 1.5 more questions. Are our panelists good if we go over about 10 to 12 minutes? Everybody okay on time? And for those that are attendees, we are recording this. I know some of you are sneaking this in during your prep period, and thank you for that. I do just want a quick follow up on what both Dave shared and Antonio and Mr. Foreman shared. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Anna Marie. This is a really cool panel because we get to see simultaneously kind of the micro level of representation in schools, the macro level, from a state level, and then also the community support level. I'm curious, Anna Marie, what was your experience in the state office there as these programs started to move forward? How did it really start to hit your radar as, oh, something unique is going on here?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so I was actually at the regional level when Dr. Salinas was in Sunnyside at the time, and we had an education advocate who was my colleague. It's called ESD here in the state of Washington, the regions are, and she was working with a young man who was actually using your WhyTry materials, and this is not a commercial for WhyTry, but it relates because our division was really interested, and we were hearing all these things, and Dr. Salinas was saying, yeah, I'm not going to go to your meeting, Dr. Cole, today because I've got to stay in my building. And we all were like, what? You're telling the superintendent you're not going to his meeting? And he's like, nope, I've got work to do. And at the same time, my colleague Amanda was working with the students. We call them the furthest from educational justice. So this young man, he was also a single parent mother, really struggling. But he took the WhyTry. She got that probably in your early days of the curriculum, and he never forgot the crab pot. There's a picture of, it's kind of the saying that show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And so the crabs try to keep the other people down. And we made a little video, and he says, well, I was getting pure F's. And then I learned that, you have to think differently. And now I have 3 A's, 2 B's, and a C and a D. And I was just like, that's great. And so.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So here's what I want to set you up for our panel here for this last little bit, because this question, or some version of this question, comes up every time we bring up, a successful implementation. I know we have attendees on live right now that come from all different types of schools and are experiencing all different types of support, from educators that may feel very supported and some that may not feel like they have the support for something like this. I want to do just maybe kind of a rapid fire response. What are some ideas that you would have, and I'll present this to the 4 of you that are on, for either actionable steps for someone that's interested in starting something like this, or tips for creating buy-in. Answer either one. Let's go. Ooh, who do I want to put on the spot first? I'm going to filibuster just a minute, give you a chance to compose some thoughts. Let's go, Dave, Mr. Foreman, Antonio, and Anna Marie. You're muted, Dave. You're still muted.
There we go. Sorry, I was trying to be polite earlier.
No, it's a good move. That's a veteran move to be able to formulate your thoughts while you're accidentally muted.
I actually right when you said that, because I get that call a lot, whether it's around school culture or graduation, like, what can I do tomorrow? And I wish it was that easy, because if it was, then you would, everybody would just, wave the magic pen at you and you could just go. But really for me, it's and I think Antonio would say the same thing, and Mr. Foreman would say the same thing. It's you got to start with relationships, and it's the center foremost part. It's the glue that holds our conceptual framework together is relationships. Do the staff feel safe where they can make a mistake and still move forward? Do they see leaders having something to offer and putting in time and energy for them? Because that, I'm telling you, that was our first year, and Chuck held the admin team accountable beyond belief. There was days where my knees were shaking. I was like, am I doing the right thing? But that was a piece, and we really had to build trust with our staff because it was broken. And you can imagine in a school where there's 49% graduation rate and high, all the excuses that you could come up for not being successful, it was there. You'd blame parents, you'd blame kids aren't here, all those different things. So we had to fix that piece first, and that it took a time, but you could tangibly feel in our building when that started to happen. And like I said, when Chuck left, and they said, no one's coming in our building that's going to mess up this great thing that we have going now. So the relationships is a big piece. If you took Power Less Powerful and you read it, I would think of your own building or organization where you are and try to see your building or your organization through the lens of that. And then try to apply those principles. It's a super easy read, and it makes a lot of sense. And this second book, Systems of Sport, super good book too. So I'm not trying to plug his books, but they definitely, when I read them, I'll read it. I usually go back every summer because it just reminds me of the work that we did. And you're not done doing the work. It just continues, because as soon as you stop doing the work, you'll start to slide back. So,
awesome.
Long answer.
That's perfect. Thank you. Mr. Foreman.
I would say from my personal standpoint is finding an admin that is committed to the process, understanding that the process isn't going to happen overnight, and that it's not going to just take one person. It's going to take a commitment within the community of not just the students, but also the staff and the district. For myself personally, I've had the opportunity to work with different people of power that make more money than I do, so they can kind of make some of the decisions and choices that suggestions that I bring up the ladder, but then also partnering with Antonio and his organization to bring in individuals and partnering with him, since I'm lucky enough to have that opportunity to then implement those type of things within our school setting, and then also my background, have had used WhyTry before, using restorative practices, and then building that culture of community within the classroom and within our school, I think has also helped us to get us to where we need to get going at least.
Awesome. Thank you. Antonio.
Yeah, I think micro, macro, Mr. Foreman said it. I mean, Dave, you said it about relationship is really consequential. You have to have leadership or vision bleeds. So I really believe it's consequential for there to be an administrator or someone who has a vision for their students. And there's a piece of even this conversation that graduation isn't good enough. Like, I'm an African-American male, I represent the African-American community. In the next 20 years, the data says that our median wealth will be zero, right? That's a problem for me. And so, like, I'll never forget Principal Baki at Fife, like one of our first conversations we had. He says, I want it to be known if there are African-Americans in our community and they want their children to be doctors and lawyers and senators, whatever you could imagine, right? Like leading the world, the next bioengineers. Like, I want them to know that they can come to our school. Now, let me tell you the power of this particular conversation. My children go to a private school in the Pierce County area. It costs $20,000 per year for high school students. Now, my children are not in high school yet, but I asked a question to the principal. I said, name the top 5 students on your campus that have graduated from this school that look like my black and brown boys. Name the top 5 successful. And like 3 of the people that he named, nothing wrong with McDonald's, nothing wrong with Walmart, but that's where they worked. And so what good is, as a parent, if I'm throwing my child in an environment where the only expectation is that they work at McDonald's, a manager at McDonald's and a manager at Walmart. My children can stay home and do that, and I can save $20,000. So this is why, like, vision for your students has to be consequential, because my children are going to be with a principal who has vision, like at a 5 high school, where you're saying, hey, it's not just about being an athlete. It's not just about being a rapper, a performer, but you can literally transform this world. So that's huge. The second thing, on a relational level, I got a call from a school who was struggling with some of their Hispanic demographic, and just a lot of fights and just like things going on, behavioral things that they felt like were out of their control. They said, what can we do? And that's the first question. I said, well, what about representation? I said, well, we don't have any representation in our staff, but it's going to take a long time for us to even answer that question. So I say it's very simple. I said, well, what relationships do you have with their parents? What's that relationship look like? Hey, what does your relationship look like with community members that reflect those students, the demographics that you're struggling with? And then what are some organizations that are already doing this work? Like, so it's not one or the other. While you're trying to fix this over here, don't abandon the problem that's going on and those that could be a part of the solution. So that's kind of how I would help, like how I would kind of speak to that question, and know, and it's obviously very complex. So like no thing that I could say could solve the problem, but I think that's a good starting point.
Let me give a non-answer for that. We've done a lot of presentations on our all hands on deck system for making changes in your school and helping with kids graduating and beyond. And one of our counselors got a call from her friend that was a counselor in a district, and they said, listen, our principal just heard your AP present about all hands on deck. I want you guys to meet once a week, and you're going to look at who's on track and who's off track. And then you're going to meet with me once a semester and you're going to tell me how we're doing. And I know it can work as science. I did it. And then he leaves the room. So that would be a non-example of, how do you think those counselors felt? How do you think they're like, what do you mean? So she's busy calling our counseling staff like, hey, can you help us? So that would be the non-example of building relations, trust with your counseling staff, because it can't be that. I think Antonio talked about that. And so you can't just put on the back of one person. You, as an admin team, you got to do the heavy lifting. We presented to SEA, the state union, one time, but right after the change started happening, and they're all coming up. It was SEA reps from all around the state of Washington saying, hey, can you talk to our admin? Can you talk to our admin? It doesn't work that way. There's got to be, from the leadership, you got to know there's a problem. You got to hold yourself accountable for, making the change, and then build relationships with staff and students, and then go.
Awesome. Thank you. Anna Marie.
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Antonio.
Okay, can I just add real quick? Okay. So one of my students at Fife, I know Mr. Foreman can attest to this. There's a young man, I got his sophomore year, was doing well academically, but was struggling and engaging in the school and beyond. And fast forward senior year, I get called into the principal's office, right? I thought I was in trouble. And he's like, oh my gosh, I cannot tell you how, like, this young man has communicated how this program has really helped him blossom. Now, what's really cool about this particular person, their name's Daniel Ige. And last spring, I got a call from them, and young people spell trust, T-I-M-E. So he called me and he says, Mr. Antonio, it's not going well. Like, I'm thinking about college decision, and like I'm just really stressed out. My parents think I'm a failure. And I'm like, well, what's going on, man? He says, well, my parents think I'm a failure because I've chosen to go to Stanford over MIT. Yeah, Dave. Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I started cracking up. Yeah, right. I'm like, and he's like, why are you laughing? I said, because I didn't have those problems. I graduated from Central Washington University. I'm like, you're the greatest failure that I ever. But I just was able to help him through his process. Now he ended up choosing MIT, and I'm very proud of him. But he was dealing with a dilemma, right? And I just was able to help give him perspective. And I think like that's a part of what these young people need, is they need someone in their building, someone in the community that can help them process through like things that can seem trivial to us, but are consequential to them.
Thank you so much. Anna Marie. By the way, no shade at Central Washington, right?
No shade.
Wonderful education.
Yes, I love Central.
Anna Marie.
Yeah, well, as you can see, we have such great, and here's the thing, I think that sometimes the narrative of public education is negative, because I mean, we've highlighted two wonderful districts and schools and systems today, and we see this all across our state. I mean, there are just such caring, dedicated educators. I know everyone who's on this webinar today is exactly this dedicated and once. And so I am just overjoyed with the resiliency and the hope and the people who keep showing up to be with our students each and every day. It's just so powerful.
Thank you so much. I'm going to add my endorsement to everything that's said. So my role with WhyTry, my background is I was a school psych in public ed, came over to WhyTry about 7 years ago, and I oversee training and research. And I get to train specifically on relationship building and on resilience. And the thing I've really learned in doing this at a much broader level for the last 7 years is the importance of intentionality. So if I were to add kind of my advice as far as a starting point or an actionable item, relationships are a thing most of us agree on. Like, I rarely have an educator say, no, relationships aren't important, but they're oftentimes one of the easiest things to fall into the background of what we have to do, because our personal assessment, all the boxes we have to check are usually very data-driven, very specific. And when we're not intentional with the relationships, those can easily be the first things that we start to lose track of a little bit. And so, as cliche of an answer as it feels, that intentionality piece is vital. And that's how we hold ourselves accountable to it. And that's how we, I think, hold one another accountable to it as well. So, you know, when I heard Dave's example of the non way to do it, or I heard about Dr. Selena refusing to leave the building because there was work to do, that's intentionality. You know, that's a very clear vision and a very clear intentionality around the relationship. So this has been such a rich discussion. I am so grateful for our panelists. I want to give you all one last question, and I'm going to ask you to keep your answers to under 30 seconds. I want to end on a really high note. Just share with me something that's given you hope right now. And while you share that, I'm going to put up a loop of our contact information. But just share with us something that is giving you hope right now in the world or in education, however you want to view that. Let's keep roughly the same order. Let's go, Dave, Mr. Foreman, Mr. Mookie Foreman. By the way, thank you. That was such a polite, subtle way of letting me know how to pronounce your name because I didn't have it. And then we'll go Antonio and Anna Marie.
What's giving me hope? I would say getting to be in the doors and walls of our building every single day and seeing the things that Antonio's talking about and our panel, you get to live it and feel it every single day. And that's what I would hope that people would see when they hear the Sunnyside story, is that it can happen. You just, or regardless of any barriers or perceived barriers or the things that are, it can happen when you're all working together for it.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Foreman.
Kind of hit on the same thing Dave just hit on. The hope that the commitment that we keep seeing with our students. You know, I also had a chance to talk with Daniel actually recently. And so seeing the stories, the success stories that we've had over the last couple of years, and then also seeing the progression that we've had within our district and working with our younger students and getting them starting programs within their buildings around our district. And in a sense, putting our kids first and creating those spaces for them to be comfortable, to be free, and to speak their mind truthfully.
Awesome. Thank you. Antonio.
Yeah, I just would say I learned this from my mother, but pay it forward. You know, when kids tell me thank you for an impact that I've made, I tell them don't thank me, because a time will come where they'll be standing in the same shoes that I'm in the same place and doing the same thing. That's how they can thank me. And so I think that there's somebody waiting on us to become us, for them to become them. Somebody needs the nourishment that's inside of them. When you open up an apple, you see apple seeds, and the soil needs those seeds. So just honored to be a part of their journey, and a part of making our future better.
Thank you. Anna Marie.
That's great. I would like to leave you with a story. Last year, I was serving as a principal in a school, and at the end of the school, that school was dissolved, and so all of our students went to different schools, and one of my frequent flyers ended up in my best friend's classroom, and he is doing amazing this year. We worked really hard to get him set up with the appropriate supports, and so don't give up on the students, give them second chances, and be able to forgive them and see the best in them.
Thank you so much. I'll add my what's giving me hope right now. Two quick things. One, just seeing the passion of educators, hearing all these stories, hearing Dave and Antonio's and Mookie's stories. Just it gets me so excited. It reminds me that the best people in the world still get into this field and have such a passion to help kiddos, and then just live in it. You know, I'm an educator, but I'm also a parent. My oldest son is a freshman at college. School has always been a struggle, and he's playing basketball at a little community college on the eastern side of Oregon. And this second semester has been so hard for him. And his coach reached out to me, said, we're trying to get him help. And my wife and I have been studying with him, and I had a first-year college professor reach out to me, and he passed all his classes, and we were so happy. We just found out this week, and that gave me a little bit of hope as well. Just a reminder that there's really good people in this world that keep looking out for our kiddos. And so I'm grateful to all of you for bringing your story, bringing your authenticity to the message. Thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you to our attendees for sticking around hearing this. We've got this recorded. If you want to share this with anybody, we'll get a link to the video out to you. And please, by all means, share and give a big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you, everybody.